Okay, so hello everyone. I'm very happy to see you all here today and to be able to present to you all the findings of our actively running GorillaWatch project for our bachelor research project, for which we are using computer vision to aid the conservation efforts of researchers in the jungle in Congo. So, so the aim, as right now briefly said, is to aid scientists in the conservation efforts of the currently endangered population of the Western lowland gorillas. So everyone is surely already in some way familiar with gorillas, but to give you a quick rundown on the most important facts for this project. So the specific subspecies we are focusing on are the Western lowland gorillas, and specifically those in the rainforest of the Congo. And their most important social pattern is that they usually move in the so-called social groups, which are groupings which include always one male silverback gorilla together with multiple female gorillas and possibly also baby gorillas. But sadly nowadays, with dangers to their habitats like poaching and disease, the numbers of Western lowland gorillas alone over the last 20 to 25 years has decreased by more than 60%, and they are currently categorized as critically endangered. So now we want to talk about how we as the GorillaWatch project can actually support the current research and conservation efforts for the Western lowland gorillas. So So using the data we have provided of many video clips of gorilla encounters made by our wildlife cameras, we want to support the effort in two ways. First of all, we want to allow researchers to be able to accurately track individual gorillas by first detecting their identities on the wildlife cameras and then combining the data of all wildlife cameras into one coherent movement tracking system. Besides this giving more insights into general traits of gorillas, this can be especially useful to track and help prevent disease outbreaks. As we already talked about that diseases, like for example, the recent Ebola epidemics are one of the two main dangers to the gorillas. And the other way is to take a census, so to be able to guess the population sizes, to then later be more accurately track the population development of the endangered animals, which is currently completely not possible with a population between 100 and 200,000 gorillas on the continent, the Western lowland gorillas on the continent. But before we want to go into the details of like how we actually implement the computer vision problem, we want to introduce you to the actual goal of this problem. And this is to aid the researchers in the jungle. And for this, we have in the last couple of days and or week or so created our first prototype to actually to use our models by the researchers. And excuse the very rudimentary UI, but this is a process with the scientists. And I just wanted to show you the most recent advancements of our project. So here you can see that we have the application, which has multiple functions, which has camera map, gorilla statistics, a labeling interface, and a video library. So on the camera map, all the locations of gorilla encounters are mapped, and each dot here represents a single camera in the jungle. We had to anonymize all this data since we don't want poachers in the jungle to be able to know where all gorillas are. But these locations and the blue spots represent cameras where we have actually labeled data show which gorillas were seen there. And then you can also see, for example, the movement patterns of these social groups, where you can see that this social group OE stays in this area and so on. And here you're able to track each gorilla on the cameras, which are most frequently seen there, the most recent images. And then also for the researchers, they were able to have these videos, look for video-specific cameras, specific gorillas, and find exactly the data they need for this. And here's an example where the camera is filtered by a gorilla, and then you can find exactly a video which contains this gorilla. But we don't want just that. We also want the statistics about the gorillas, where they most frequently are, when they have been seen, to also know when a gorilla dies. And for this, we also implemented the interface and the functionality. But then comes the core of our application, which is to actually label these. And the current problem is that with such a large population in the jungle, this is just not feasible. And two scientists can actually track some area, but only around 70 gorillas, and with a population of in the hundreds of thousands, this is just not feasible to actually take care of this population. And for this, we have created the Gorilla Tracker, which is able to pre-label data and then make it way easier for all the scientists to track them around the jungle and see how the population is behaving and to know what are the most important measures to save the population. And so coming to this, we want to get to the heart of our actual project. And this is to then be able to re-identify these gorillas with image and video models. So for this, we want to show you our workflow. And actually, the workflow is made out of two separate workflows. The first one is to extract all the gorilla images from the large amounts of video data we have available. And for creating the data set we need. And the second one is to then use these extracted images for actual final identification of the gorillas. And so for the first workflow, and we're going to go into both in more detail, we're using an object detection module, which locates these gorillas in the pictures, outputs the coordinates of the bounding boxes, which can then be used to extract those single areas of video frames, which can either be faces or bodies. And so for the second step, those images are then fed into a vision transform model, which we use state-of-the-art transformer architectures, and then is able to, using representation learning and k nearest neighbors, for which we use then k equals to 5, is able to find the most similar gorilla IDs, and then is able to predict an ID for the newly encountered gorilla. But so we have this, and we want to talk about now what kind of data we have as the basis. And for this, we actually have two kinds of data. The first one are wildlife camera trap data, for which we are collaborating with the two researchers, Magdalena Bermejo and Germán Iera. And the second one is from our collaboration with the Berlin Zoo and the footages that has been created by planting camera traps into the Berlin Zoo. And so first to our actually most important data, which is the wildlife camera data set. This consists over 242,000 of videos. And actually of those, we also have then the labeled data from the scientists. And those we were able to extract 132 labeled images. And from those, 78 individuals. But this data, since it's from camera traps in the jungle, has very inconsistent lighting, very sometimes far away gorillas, and also a strong class imbalance with also redundancy of duplicated images. So you can see here the quality is very not so high, and also there's a high level of duplication. And also knowing that the most important features to actually identify gorillas is the nose and the wrinkles above the nose, which are, especially for the first row and for the first individual here, completely not detectable. This is actually quite a hard problem to solve. And also our data is quite imbalanced, as you can see here, which are each the individuals and how much samples they have. So we had to do a lot of data cleaning and taking care of the data. And for this, first of all, we reduced all the images with very low image quality, which sometimes can be less than 50 pixels by 15 pixels, which often are, even if you just look at it as a human, are hard to detect that this is even a gorilla face. And then also the duplicates, since in videos, most of the images are complete duplications. This is mostly for the image models, since video models do need this kind of duplication. And then also like just cleaning the faces and making sure the crops are actually correctly. And then the second data, to go more to detail, is from the Berlin Zoo. And there we actually have also 6,500 unlabeled videos over 5 individuals on the zoo. And for this also, we have been using our model to pre-label them and confirm all the labels, which can then be used to also identify gorillas in the zoos. And yeah, so But now the question is, how do we actually get from this camera trap videos, which are unstructured, high volume and cluttered, to like the actual usable data of clean centered crops of single gorilla images for re-identification. So on the left is what we have, and on the right is what we want and need for our models. And for this, the solution are YOLO detection models, which we use. And we fine-tuned them on our custom data set to extract bounding boxes around the gorilla instances. And this especially filters out non-informative frames, which can definitely happen, of just recordings of the empty jungle. And then it also focuses the import on the relevant regions and thereby improving the data quality for downstream processing. And actually, we have trained two specialized detectors, one for the body and one for the face. And this allows us to search for faces only within crop bodies, improving the face detection process, and also experiment with the different options of just using faces, just using bodies, or both. And for the connection, we use matching algorithms to connect them and make sure for each face there's also a body. Sometimes there is no face to a body, since the gorilla can be turned away. But yeah, and this matters because like it reduces all the background noises that makes the re-identification almost impossible and ensures that each input to our reality model is clean and a single individual crop. And then we don't get actually just image by image label data from the scientists, but again, we get tracklet data. And so for this, we use BotSort for multiple object tracking and to be able to track the movements of those models across the videos. And then we input the YOLO bounding boxes and through this process have temporarily coherent tracklets that then can be associated with the tracklets from the given data. And actually, what we're doing there with the Gorilla dataset is something completely new, and there is no dataset on for wildlife conservation of gorillas, and we will also be publishing all the data we've created in an anonymous way, so we can aid other scientists to help save gorillas around the planet. And so now we want to talk, after I showed you how we extract our data, how we actually, the pipeline for re-identification works to predict the individual identities. And for this, we have three main approaches which evolved over time. And the first is fine-tuning a large vision foundation model. The second is an ensemble of these large vision image foundation models through different ensemble strategies, such as majority voting, confidence-based voting, and embedding pooling of those models. And last but not least, also the first option is the fine-tuning of video foundation models. And for this, I first want to talk about the image pipeline we use. And we conducted very extensive surveys for what is the optimal combination here, and we tested out most of the available state-of-the-art models such as SwimV2, VIT Clip, ResNet, Inception, EfficientNet, and of course also the DynaV2 models. And besides this, we also tested out these in combination with large amounts of different loss functions, like different variants of triple loss, arc phase loss, and many, many more. But the final configuration, which was by far the most effective, is a pre-trained backbone of the VIT joint DynaV2 model with an embedding linear layer of 256 and as objective function, a hard quadruplet triplet online loss together with some regularization of L2 and L2SB, and then some other techniques additionally, such as gradient accumulation and sharding. And for the metric, we want to see the accuracy of our KNN classification. And the important thing is here, two challenges. One, it should be cross video, since it's very easy to re-identify a video from the same tracklet, but also doesn't give so much information. And then also closed set. So we want to be able to predict gorillas that are not seen during training, since we have a training set of 76 wildlife gorillas, but the population is in the 100,000. So we want to be able to accurately predict all of those gorillas and actually expand the amount of gorillas the researchers can track. So we have a closed set approach. And so for this, to the image model, we have the following results, which are for face images, we have results of 69%, and for body images of 76% of accuracy, which is by far higher than other researchers were able to predict, and we have been improving this continuously. But this is not completely ready for production, and we've been working on this more. And as said, we also have ensemble techniques, and these ensemble techniques, through different voting strategies and embedding poolings, combine these results and are then able to actually reach a lot higher results. And we're able to, at this point, have accuracy of 83% accuracy with an ensemble of a body, the face model together, which is already quite high, as for a human, these amounts of percentages are very hard. And using also then location, it is actually very, very highly effective to identify these gorillas. And as the third option for pipeline, we also tested out video models. And for this, we group crops together of video input, same for the ensemble. And we tested out multiple models, but the most effective were Timesform and intern video. And actually, intern video is already very close to the models of the ensemble, which has the advantage of having the temporal aspect of the data, which the ensembles do not have. And yeah, there's a lot of improvement and a lot of options we're currently testing out, especially since right now we're only using the intern video on faces. So we're steadily improving that and actually reaching every week high accuracy of the gorillas. And to give you a small overview of our models currently, those are our results. So currently highest are 83% of being able to always then identify the correct gorillas. But as talked before, we also want to know how big the population is. So we want to be able to use the embeddings to then accurately predict how many individuals we have. And for this, we use a constraint-based approach, since we want to, across the videos, know this is the same gorilla or not, since with the embeddings of the simple dino model, we have a lot of embeddings which can be closest together, and we can say this gorilla probably has the same as this one. But if we have completely unlabeled data, we also want to be able to predict and draw the lines between different gorillas. And so for this, we use constraint-based clustering. And so if two gorillas, for example, appear in the same video, they obviously cannot have the same identity. And we can set them to infinite distance, which makes the probability, which separates those clusters. And the same thing in the other way goes for gorillas and images from the same tracklet. So if an image is from the same tracklet, it obviously is also the same gorilla. And doing this, we were able to rapidly increase also our accuracy. And another way also is if two gorillas appear on cameras, which are distant from each other at the exact same time, this also means that those are two different gorillas. And this is also a thing we can use. And we are able to completely accurately predict a lower border for these. So sometimes, I guess, not completely accurate, since sometimes it overshoots. But during the clustering, we were already able to have a lower border for these. And these names down there are the social groups of the gorillas. And as this is a bachelor's research project, we are currently ongoing and also researching in new directions. And for this, for example, we are using also explainable re-ID with multimodal reasoning through reinforcement learning, also adapting image models to video data through pre-training, such as taming Dino. And as said, video constraint clustering. Also, we are retraining Timesformer using the VIT Dino, as the normal transformer just uses the VIT, which could be a big improvement. And also we're implementing on enhancements through segmentation and enhanced object tracking. So to summarize the results of our project and the outlooks, we were able to improve the re-ID and population counting powered by image and video models, have been able to create a constraint algorithms for acquiring better data on how many gorillas are in the area, and also are creating and building an all-around platform to empower researchers in the gorilla preservation and conservation to be able to more effectively monitor gorillas around the jungle. And yes, I want to thank you all for listening and the attention. And also, I want to give especially a big thank you to the researchers which are supporting us and giving us the needed data, Magdalena Bermejo and Germán Ilera, and also the Sabina Plattner African Charities Organization, which this is a collaboration with, and also the Zoo Berlin, of course, and Conservation X Labs, and our helpers, Maximilian Schall, advisors, Maximilian Schall, and yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening. And yeah, I hope it was interesting.
Yeah, fantastic. So there's a lot of comments, but there are some questions. I'll try to piece them together here so that they make some sort of sense. There was a group of questions that came in regards to how you're accounting for low light conditions. I guess the commentary was that in a jungle setting, the contrast is very large between a gorilla and, say, the foliage in the background. But how do you account for very low light conditions where a black gorilla may blend in very well with either very dark foliage or no light sources? How do you account for these kind of conditions where the contrasts are not very large? You're on audio, Maximilian, so maybe unmute.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so especially to also help the models in low light conditions to know where the gorilla is, we have been experimenting with segmentation and trained these models on these very hard conditions to be able to more clearly make the model see where the relevant gorilla is. And this has also helped to actually focus on the gorilla, since it also is an issue of, for example, the model over focusing on the foliage. Since as seen in the data, gorillas move in specific areas and we don't want the model to learn the backgrounds. But yeah, like it is, I think probably the most challenging part, the lighting conditions and the fact that gorilla faces are completely black. And we've been experimenting with like upping the contrast, but I think this hasn't been shown so much effectiveness due to like the transformer architectures already being able to pretty well put the focus. But yeah, I think this is the biggest challenge probably we have. Yeah.
Okay, and we'll try to do one last question here, which is around synthetic data. So maybe more generally, you can speak to, did you use synthetic data? If you didn't, are you considering it in future iterations? If so, how do you believe you would be able to fold it into your research?
In what way synthetic data?
So the idea was around a body and face detection.
Yeah. So I don't know if this is like going in the direction of creating synthetic gorilla images with stable diffusion, but something we have been using for data augmentation, which I can go talk about, is unsupervised creation of the labeled data set, since the labeling is quite manpower limited by the researchers. So we also have been using the constraints, which you mentioned for the clustering, to also use them to creating data sets and using them to create triplets, for example, to know if these gorillas are in the same tracklet, but another gorilla is at a different location. In that way, we can also create new labeled data or semi-labeled data without actually the researchers having to give us specific labels.